Recording live from the Jon Jon and Company studio in Denver, Colorado, the Jon Jon Happy Hour. Now here's your host, the friend you didn't know you needed, Jon Jon Lannen.
Hey everybody, it's me, and welcome back to the Jon Jon Happy Hour. For those of you who are returning, of course, welcome back. And for those of you newly joining us, welcome to the Jon Jon Happy Hour. I'm your host, the boy so nice, they named him twice, Jon Jon Lannen. I am so thrilled for today's episode of the JJHH. Truly, because it's dedicated to one of my favorite things in the entire universe. Professional wrestling. As most of you guys know, since I was just a little bonbon, I've been a huge wrestling fan. Actually, I've dedicated most of my recent YouTube videos to that. And on my channel, you can actually find Slam Crate unboxings, reaction videos, and vlogs, including footage from WWE Raw and AEW Dynamite live. Man, I really miss live wrestling events. Well, anywho, that brings us to this moment in time. Enjoying wrestling events virtually with friends across the globe. Something I've always wanted to be a part of for as long as I can remember is providing analysis for matches inside the squared circle. Something I've always wanted to be a part of for as far as I can remember is providing analysis for matches inside the squared circle. I've always wanted to color commentate WWE events. Actually, WWE commentator Tom Phillips even thinks I could do it.
Hey, Jon Jon, how you doing? This is Tom Phillips from WWE. And you know what? Maybe someday you can make a great WWE commentator. So we'll see where the road takes you.
Aw, thanks, Tom. Oh my god, his voice is like butter. But in all seriousness, we're going to dedicate this Jon Jon Happy Hour to the first in a long line of series, the JJHH Wrestling episode. One of my favorite events that WWE puts on is its annual Wrestlemania event, guys. And when I think of my favorite Wrestlemania, I gotta tell you guys, X-Seven has to be my downright favorite. Now, Wrestlemania X-Seven was held in Houston, Texas in April 2001 in what I'd say arguably is the peak of the Attitude Era. And despite having some stiff competition, in my opinion, 17 was the best. I'm also not the only one who thinks that it ranks as one of the most epic WrestleManias of all time. I actually am going to be joined by 3 guest panelists who love wrestling, arguably more than me, and have a genuine love for, of course, Wrestlemania X-Seven. So we'll be right back with that and much more after this message.
Are you constantly making people laugh? Have your family members and friends told you that you're funny? Well then, jump into the hilarious world of improv and comedy. The Jon Jon & Co. School of Comedy is now enrolling. Class sizes are limited and will sell out quickly. For more information on these courses, please visit us at jonjonandco.com. That's jonjonandco.com. See you on stage!
Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight, turn the bass up a bit.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Jon Jon Happy Hour special wrestling episode. As I mentioned, today we're going to be joined by some lovely mates from across the world, and we're talking Wrestlemania X-Seven. Wrestlemania X-Seven included some of the most iconic matches in World Wrestling Entertainment history. It was one of the WrestleManias that I personally was most immersed in as a pro wrestling fan. And you guys, I gotta tell you, I was mesmerized by the McMahon family feud, the WWF Championship match between icon Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and the countless entertaining matches across the night. And of course, the historic TLC2 match. WrestleMania 7 was one for the ages. Before we get any further into Mania 17, I want to welcome some guests to the pod. First, from the Music Vox, Drop Ball, and Ring Post radio podcast, this 21-year-old has not only loved wrestling since a young age, but has worked hand in hand with wrestling companies backstage and in their AV areas. From across the pond, I'd like to introduce you to Adam Westwood. Hey, Adam, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing, dude?
It's so good to have you on the show, and of course, welcome to the Happy Hour. How stoked are you for today?
I'm really excited. Been listening to you for a little while now. I'm really excited to be here as well as a fan.
We are thrilled to have you. I got to tell you, before we get into it, what would you say is your favorite WrestleMania 17 match?
For me, it's TLC 2. It was probably the third or fourth wrestling match I ever watched. I'll get into that when we talk about the match more specifically.
Oh, I love that. Yes, definitely save it. We will definitely get into more of that in just a little bit. Next, I'd like you all to meet a renowned indie rapper, singer, and songwriter out of Houston, Texas. This musician has a deep passion for not only music and writing, but is a huge wrestling fan. Ladies and gentlemen, Methodikal.
What's up, guys?
Hey, Methodikal. I'm so thrilled you're here. This may go without saying, but what would you say is your favorite WrestleMania moment?
I would honestly have to say the main event between Stone Cold and The Rock, especially the last part of it that no one saw coming.
Oh, you're so right. Like the plot twist of plot twists. As wrestling fans, we were shook. But you're right. We will get into that. And last but certainly not least, a popular YouTuber, streamer, and musician. This next panelist is also 1/3 of the TCJ podcast from Manchester. He and I have talked about doing this for some time now. To round out the panel, here is Christian Reeve.
What's going on, man?
Hello. Okay, how excited are you for this moment?
Very. I've always wanted to talk about wrestling in this kind of capacity because I could talk about it all day. So I'm very pumped for this.
Oh, it's going to be such a good time. Who would you say, Christian, is your favorite superstar from WrestleMania 17?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Probably The Rock, just off the top of my head, but that could change at any moment.
Right, like a total icon. I totally hear that. Well, gentlemen, once again, welcome to the Jon Jon Happy Hour wrestling episode. Now, what Adam, Methodikal, Christian, and I are going to do is to do a full recap of the 17th showcase of the Immortals in the Astrodome. And that, I don't know if you guys know this, is actually from Methodikal's home city, Houston, Texas. Methodikal, I know you and I and the crew were talking before the show, but can you tell us a little bit more about the Astrodome? What do they do there? Have you ever been there? Talk to us.
Well, obviously, the Astrodome was home to Houston Astros baseball team, Major League Baseball team, up until like a certain point, like 2001, 2002, when they moved into what is now called Minute Maid. So it's like once a year. They use it mostly for livestock show and rodeo. But at that time, this was before like Reliant and everything was built. They used that venue specifically for WrestleMania 17, and man, it was huge. And if you've ever seen like the Astrodome, it's pretty huge. It's still pretty big to this day. It's still there. It still has all the memories of baseball as well as WrestleMania 17, and that was actually the first WrestleMania I ever been to, and it was awesome because it was in like my hometown. When they kept saying Houston, I was like, "Are you serious?"
You're like, "I'm there. I am so there."
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was like I was like so hyped for it and everything, and then like it's just like everybody like in school was like talking about it and stuff. We were talking about like making signs and stuff like that. So it was awesome.
That is wicked awesome. And I know we're all probably nerding out, right? I mean, it's like we're a bunch of giddy schoolgirls hearing that news. I mean, wouldn't you guys agree, Christian and Adam?
Yeah. The idea of going to WrestleMania is almost one of those like lifelong dreams, especially like over here in the UK. It's quite difficult to get to any wrestling show that the WWE hold over here. Like the most we usually get maybe two Raw or SmackDowns a year over here. And then about a week or so of live shows. And all of those live shows sell out like 17,000 seat arenas every night. So the thought of a WrestleMania itself is amazing, let alone potentially one of the greatest ones of all time.
I think the best one was probably when we had SummerSlam back in the 90s.
That's right.
Probably like the biggest one. I mean, because for a while we had like regular pay-per-views as well, like Insurrection, and I think Rebellion was the other one.
Yeah.
And then they just scrapped it. So it's just like, oh, man.
It was about a 3-year run. It was about a 3-year run in the early 2000s. We had pay-per-views every year here. But then since then, we get maybe 2 Raws a year at a push.
Wow, that's wild. And now and then how does the to go on a little bunny trail here for a second, but how does the NXT UK taping work? Is that all done at the same facility similar to the Performance Center, or does that kind of travel as well throughout the UK?
I think they travel, don't they?
Yeah, so with NXT UK, they travel around the country and go to different arenas, but they're usually a lot smaller in scale because the NXT UK brand, especially to a lot of UK fans, isn't really well revered. A lot of us don't really enjoy the brand and enjoy the product because it is almost a watered down version of the independent scene that we can get. For example, you could go to a Progress show and see half the same wrestlers for half the price and actually get to talk to them and engage with them rather than a sheltered WWE event. So a lot of fans in the UK aren't really big fans of the NXT UK brand, but hopefully that will change in the next few years.
I agree with that. There's some really excellent wrestlers in NXT UK. But the overall presentation. To be honest with you, I sort of look at NXT as a whole, and I'm not big on it. I like the wrestling in it, but there's something that's off about the presentation. It's a bit too squeaky clean or something. I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I dig the NXT brand as a whole, UK and obviously the standard brand, but there's something that I just can't get behind. I hate to harp on it, and we can get into it in another episode, but it's almost, and I'm probably going to get red for this, but it's almost trying too hard, right?
It really is.
Dig, but it's also to your point, let's get that indie circuit scene in there, because that's the fun and love we all have for wrestling.
That's the point on NXT UK. It does feel like they're trying to take the raw, quite grimy and gritty UK wrestling scene and put it through the WWE filter and sort of make it so they'll have these big grand venues and they'll try and fill out with stars. But a lot of the time there will be UK wrestling shows I've been in shady bars and whatever. And I'm not saying that WWE is going to ever have a show in a shady bar by any means, but certainly the way they present the show should be a lot different to the way it is. It feels like any other WWE show. And the UK wrestling scene is so different to any other scene in the world, so it should be presented as such.
Logically, it has to be different though, because it's when WWE comes over to the UK, the draw is WWE. It's seeing the American superstars, the style of wrestling, everything, right? But NXT UK, it's as you said, it's taking one thing and trying to push it into another thing, and it's if anything, it should just be treated as its own independent thing. Sure, it carries the WWE brand and name and everything, but it should be treated as an entirely different entity if it's really going to work and connect with people. Because UK audience is different. We absolutely love wrestling. It's obviously part of UK culture as well, but it's different for us because we had classic wrestling back in the 70s, 80s with World of Sport and stuff, but then it kind of died down, and now it's a bit more niche again. It is growing in popularity, but it's not anywhere near where it used to be.
Yep, I totally agree with what you're saying there. And similar, that's a beautiful segue. I think wrestling fans at large are coming back into the wrestling world in droves, And I do think the one thing that is a tough thing to tackle, I call them the muggles, right? The muggles, how do we reach the regular folks out in the world to watch wrestling? And that's something that we haven't seen in many moons. And that brings us right back into WrestleMania 17. That was one of the most iconic times in the era of wrestling. And as Methodikal mentioned, he was there live and in the spot. So I just think it's wild to think where wrestling it goes into. It's very similar to real estate, right? There's waves. It's up and down and up and down. And I think we're going to see another renaissance. I think we're close.
I keep hearing people in the industry, especially wrestlers and insiders, saying the wrestling business is cyclical, and when you look at it like that, it does kind of seem to go like that. It was massive late 90s, early 2000s, then it kind of took a dip, and then it kind of had a bit of a resurgence in early 2010s, and then a dip again, and now we're back in a big massive kind of rise again, I guess.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's twofold, right? Not only the level of superstar and storyline that you have, but I think a major piece and component to it is the commentary team. And that's one thing of WrestleMania 17 that we got a treat, folks. This WrestleMania, we had commentary doing with two of my personal favorites, Paul Heyman and JR. Now, this duo made for a deliciously tense team. They were constantly disagreeing. Do I mean constantly? I mean, every single time they were disagreeing. And I dig Paul Heyman's just insane, outlandish, sayings throughout the entire thing. And then, of course, JR just being JR. But what did you guys think? What were your thoughts on Paul Heyman, JR, the entire commentating team?
Paul Heyman was like the ultimate heel of commentary.
Yeah. It's so easy to hate Paul Heyman, And I think there's a lot of wrestlers and personalities, superstars like that. Paul Heyman's just an easy guy to hate. And when he had that ponytail, folks, in the back of that ball cap, oh my God. How can you not hate it? I have a man bun. It's easier to hate someone with that,
I got to say, because it was for about a year that he was on commentary before he transitioned and then obviously did the thing with Brock. And with other pay-per-views and events, they've worked very well together. Obviously, they've worked together in the past. I think possibly in AWA. I might be wrong though, or WCW. But on this particular show, I gotta say, I didn't like it. I the whole time I was just thinking I wish that Jerry Lawler was there. Because it just felt a bit like this is the biggest WrestleMania that was ever. There ever was, and JR and Jerry Lawler were I don't know what would be they just fit together like a hand on a glove. Do you know what I mean? It was good, it worked, and it was understandable because they had a little storyline. Obviously, it's WCW versus and ECW versus WWF, so it's that's why they're kind of constantly arguing, and obviously with Heyman playing a heel and everything, but. Yeah. I don't know, for me, sometimes I'd listen to their commentary in between matches and hear them bickering, and I was just like who gives a shit? Look at the card, look at what's going on right now. I get that it's part of it, but I've never been a fan of the commentators having storylines anyway. I don't, it's not really my thing, but
I got you. Do you think? I think that's a really good point. Now, do you think that is truly kayfabe, or in storyline, or do you think they had this true animosity outside of the commentator table?
Oh no way! I think that was all storyline.
100% kayfabe.
I would agree with that. I wonder because there was times that it was so cringeworthy. To your point, Christian, that you're just do they really hate each other? And then the flip side is they're both experts in the industry, of course. They're likely just immersed in this line here.
But I would like to say, although that at times it can be a bit frustrating as they are constantly back and forth with this animosity between them, as it's supposed to be between the brands, I do think that they are probably one of the better commentary teams we've ever had for a technical wrestling standpoint. And I think that's sort of, you notice that a lot more with the Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit match, for example, and the William Regal versus Chris Jericho match. You hear them actually get into they're discussing why moves are being hit, why things are being used, and you see that, for example, now with some of the NXT teams with guys like Nigel McGuinness as one of the color commentators. But I think this team very well highlighted more of the technical side that you would have got rather than from King, shall I say.
That was one of the reasons why I couldn't get invested in him at times, because I completely agree with you. When he was just focusing on the match in-ring product, it was excellent. But then he'd go from that to back on harping on hating JR or getting angry about something else, and it was just so stop-start for me. It was a bit weird because whereas when Jerry Lawler was a heel, it was kind of comical because he would forever support the heels and the baby faces, but he did it in a funny way where it didn't piss off JR, and they'd only have tiny squabbles, but generally they were just this unit.
Definitely. So, I don't know.
Distracting for me, but I completely agree with that, man. He was, but it makes sense because Paul Heyman's been in the industry for so long, and same with JR. I think that the bigger point probably, I don't think there was any animosity between those guys, but I do think they were probably massively on edge because obviously they have Vince shouting down their ear 24/7. And
that would be wild. I mean, can you imagine us recording a podcast and someone is in your ear just I could not imagine having that's it. And Michael Cole's an expert in the field now. I mean, he's really grown into his own as a commentator, but that is Vince blaring in his ear. I mean, if that's not Vince McMahon, I don't know what it is. I'm pretty sure that's just a fembot.
Someone who's done commentary a few times, it is incredibly difficult to just concentrate, even when you're just watching a match and trying to explain everything that's going on. Both times I did it, it was without a person in my ear screaming, telling me what to do. It was just me freeballing everything. But I can imagine after years and years of doing it, I assume that Vince McMahon's voice doesn't sound like anything at all to Michael Cole anymore. But
well, no, but he's always calling audibles, isn't he? And you know, like the way that they describe it, it's not like someone nicely saying like, "JR, please say this." It's more like, mention the line, damn it.
It's so true. No, I like I said, I couldn't even imagine. But to all of you guys' points, I think there is some merit to the commentator team and definitely some fumbles as well. But you did mention some technical matches, which brings us right into the first match. This was the WWF Intercontinental Championship title match, and it featured, of course, William Regal and Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, awesome. Folks, is one of my favorites. But Methodical, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this this lovely match reffed by Tim White.
Man, I always loved Chris Jericho. I am still a huge Chris Jericho fan. And like,
sorry, real quick to digress, are you all AEW fans as well? Are you guys a fan of the AEW piece, and are you guys watching?
Hell fucking yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Hell fucking yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Back to you, Methodical.
So, man, yeah, like I no disrespect to anyone, but like, man, William Regal, like at that time, I always just felt was like, dude, why are you dissing Chris Jericho so bad? What did he ever do to you?
For real. You know, that's another great point. Another person immersed in the industry is William Regal, right? Yeah, I'm sure there has to be some love for you guys across the pond too. I've had always an affinity for William Regal. I mean, a great technical wrestler, an exceptional heel. But yeah, I just think he's top notch.
I think the UK wrestling scene is going to be forever indebted to William Regal for the introduction to most the current like American audience. Like obviously there was the British Bulldog before him, but William Regal did so much in bringing the spotlight to the UK wrestling scene, and I think without him we wouldn't be experiencing the current boom period we have.
Could you help make an analogy? Like if William Regal is UK's this as the America's this in the wrestling industry, if there's even a comparison.
It's quite difficult because obviously with the way he was treated in the WWF, he did in the WWE as well today. He did almost everything apart from win the big one. So it's almost like he's almost like the Jake the Snake Roberts figure to us. Yeah. In terms of he's a killer talker. He won everything he could possibly win apart from the big one. And every time he's on the TV, people are instantly drawn to him. Obviously, we see him on NXT every week as the general manager, but even to this day, he's still got one of the best promos in the business. I go back and watch that promo of him and Triple H in the early 2000s almost like a bi-monthly basis because it was just so good. He's so good at talking and getting people into their seats. And during this time as the commissioner, I think it was some of his best work.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one because just like Jake the Snake Roberts, like Jake the Snake never needed the title. It was like one of those things. Like some guys just don't need the title, and it's not a good idea to put it on them. And I think the same was the case for Regal. Like they could have done that, but like to be honest, that wasn't really his role. Do you know what I mean? And like the heel doesn't always necessarily have to have the title. It's like if you take modern day stuff as an example, like Bray Wyatt as an example, right? My personal opinion is he never should have had the title. Like they should have just kept him as this monster that attacks people and is kind of like behind the scenes and all that stuff. And there's always this like fixation on, well, if he's the top guy, the main eventer guy, he has to have the title. And it's like, that's not always what a guy needs. It's like everyone on the card has different kind of goals, purposes, and so on and so forth. And I think, as you mentioned before, like Regal was so technologically sound in terms of like his knowledge and his in-ring experience and everything he brought to the table. Like it's no surprise to me that like he's now part of the NXT brand and doing all of that stuff. Like it's just like the logical kind of move, really.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you guys more. And I think it's funny you guys mentioned Jake the Snake. Jake the Snake, in everyone's heart, there's weird love and thank for him. But I think you're right. You don't view him as this iconic champion, right? Heavyweight champion, but a major piece to this industry, and William Regal is no exception. And when I think about epic intercontinental champions, European champions, I really do. The first people that come to mind are people like William Regal for many different reasons. Although Regal is the bomb.com, he could not pull out a win, of course, in this match. Jericho won the bout, of course, and retained the title with that lion salt finisher, of course, resulting in the 3 count. I was okay with this match here. I was okay with it going over to Jericho.
I think at the time it had to stay with Jericho. Like, I always find it as the commissioner role, shall I say, with the Regal had at the time, trying to get the person that you're seeing as your management. I think involving those so much in a title picture, even if it is a minor title like the Intercontinental Championship, I do think it can cause problems. I think if anyone was going to be able to handle that responsibility, it would have been William Regal. But I do think maintaining Jericho as the IT champion, which obviously we saw which led him to the massive year he had with the following year at WrestleMania 18, I think it was the right decision to keep it on Jericho.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that as well is that, like, because obviously these guys have been feuding around this time. I'm not sure how long, because, like, immediately when I saw this match, I was like, okay, this is going to be a perfect opener and everything. But I was immediately drawn to, if you guys remember, they had a match where it's the Queensberry Rules match or some shit. Yeah, and it was just basically like Regal fucking over Jericho and being like, no, actually, that's the end of the first round, and now it's this round, and blah, blah, blah.
And it's exactly how Regal would play, right? You just, like, it was so perfect.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And as I understand, like, in that feud, Regal was losing a lot, but, like, that was kind of the whole point of it. Like, you know, it was just Jericho clowning him. It was sort of pushing Jericho. I mean, logically, I think it was more kind of, okay, he's messing with management. Jericho's in that mid-card position. We want to push him to the main event. This is how we're going to do it. He's going to feud with this guy. Then he's going to, you know, probably start feuding with Vince or something and then get to the top. You know, it's all logical and planned out and everything. And I think the only thing I would have changed in this feud is probably to have, like, Regal come into WrestleMania as the champion and have Jericho win it, like, off him. So it's more of a kind of like, you know, because WrestleMania now has been established as that, like, fairy tale thing, isn't it? It's like, if you take the Kofi Kingston storyline, you know,
what a moment, huh? Wow.
You know, then he gets it at the big one, and it's like, that's, you want that feel good moment, and that's what they've made WrestleMania now. I think, like, they were still kind of establishing that at this time, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, solid match, you know.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think WrestleMania really is, you know, they call it the showcase of the immortals, and it really is that fairy tale land, I think, where people really do cash in. The one thing that was unique about this WrestleMania is there was quite a bit of title hand changes here in 17. But let's kind of shift over to the next match here. The next match, of course, was Taz and the APA with Jacqueline versus the easy to hate Right to Censor with Steven Richards. Now, of course, in this match, Taz, that's right, Taz the Acolyte, accompanied by Jacqueline, of course, took on the Right to Censor. Now, the Right to Censor was Bull Buchanan, the Good Father Val Venus, and of course, escorted by the wonderful Steven Richards. I just think the Acolytes are badass. The APA is just, I think it goes without saying. Teaming them up with someone like Taz, I just think is, what an exceptional choice for just a fun second card match, you know?
Okay, 2 things. 1, I'll show you, you'll see.
Oh, yeah.
And secondly, this is just, like, I have my notes here and it's all, you know, like, solid match, blah, blah, blah. But, like, the main things I took away from this were, 1, Bull Buchanan was so massively underrated.
I mean, say it one more time for the people in the back.
Yeah, like, I remember, like, because eventually he just became, like, they put him with Big Boss Man, didn't they? And that was pretty cool. And then, like, he was the guy that they could just never find a spot for. But he was so good in the ring. Like, he was this 300-pound guy that could just jump around the ring and off the top rope and everything. Like, he was way ahead of his time, but never seemed to, like, fit anywhere. And I think in the end they put him with John Cena or something.
Yeah, he became B Squared. It was
That's
like
right.
When Cena was a rapper, he was B Squared, and his muscle.
I felt bad about that. I always wanted him to go far, but, like, this match was all about Bradshaw.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, Bradshaw was just pummeling people, which, you know, resulted in the end too. Of course, Bradshaw, the Good Father, with a clothesline, of course, and won the bout. Bradshaw is just a badass. I love Bradshaw into the JBL transition. I just think he's another top-notch guy. You know, but one thing I will say about JBL is he's a huge advocate, which I think a lot of people don't know, for the LGBTQ plus community, which is kind of ironic. Shout out to Bradshaw for being, you know, an advocate and ally. I think that's a really, really wicked thing. And, it's not an easy thing to do in this society, especially in the wrestling world. I think it's very easy to come under fire for, anything that's beyond the traditional norm we've seen in our history.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's only started coming out in more recent years, isn't it? But with like actual wrestlers that are gay, like, I don't know, what's that guy who used to be in WWE? Darren Young.
Triple H. Yeah, Triple H. Uh-huh. I'm kidding, Triple H, but if you're listening, you could get it.
That being said,
can you imagine Triple H is listening to this podcast? He's like,
the first thing he says is, "So you want to play the game?"
I'm like, "Oh, I do." I just spit water at him.
Are you ready? Oh man, so many creepy images in my mind right now.
Absolutely. And speaking of creepy images, the next match was a treat of creep. Raven versus Kane versus The Big Show and the WWF Hardcore Championship match. Now, this was not only one of my favorites. Thank you for. I mean, that was literally the thing I was just going to say. Methodikal, you stole the words right from my mouth. But hit on that a little bit. Why'd you love the championship so much?
Man, because okay, it's like now with the 24/7 championship, it's like they kind of watered down the hardcore championship, but it's like that was one of the best championship matches I always looked forward to, because you were gonna see something just wild and everything. And what I love more about hardcore championship more than anything is just, especially Raven would actually come down the ramp with this cart full of weapons and everything. Man, I used to love the energy and everything when it came to a hardcore match, because you literally had no idea what was going to happen. That was probably one of the most unpredictable championships ever.
So let's hit on that. So you mentioned earlier in the show, which we all geeked out about, that you were at Wrestlemania X-Seven in Houston. And this match, of course, took a turn in the entire stadium. So what do you remember about that match specifically? Do you remember trying to, dodge this guy to see this guy to go to the back? Were you watching it on the screen? Walk us through the in the moment of this hardcore match.
Well, from what I could see, because it wasn't a lot of people in front of me, but which was cool and everything. And it's weird when you watch it live versus watching it on TV, because it's you're so used to hearing the commentary, but then when you're actually watching it, it's just it just gives you that adrenaline and that energy. And watching a hardcore championship match and everything, especially when they leave the arena and stuff like that, and you have to watch it on the Titantron and stuff, it still gives you that adrenaline and everything. And man, I was always a huge Kane fan. I still am. And Raven he still makes appearances, but I don't know if he actually performs still.
Yeah, but I think he does do a little bit, like you mentioned, on the indie circuit. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think Kane is just, class act and show too. I think there's a really fun match. I think to your point, they're going all through the entire stadium. I loved, Show slamming Kane through wooden pallets, Kane throwing through Raven through some glass.
Kane on the golf cart. Kane on the golf cart needs to be spoken about. Seeing as it's almost came back up on it's almost became a thing in AEW these last few weeks with Sammy Guevara's constant pain with golf carts. But just seeing Kane in a golf cart is one of the best images this WrestleMania will ever give anyone.
Can I just say as well, what if you watch AEW right now, everything that they're doing right now, it's like watching WrestleMania 17 or this period in wrestling. For me, it just feels like being back and watching old school style wrestling.
The height of the Attitude Era.
That's right. But still innovative, right? I mean, great example is this Double or Nothing Stampede match, right? It's not something you've seen before necessarily, right? But it's still so reminiscent of this time. I think that's a really, really good point. But you're right. I also think the flip side is true. This definitely felt like a game of Mario Kart at one point, with everybody interchanging the golf carts, Kane rolling through. I just thought that was a hysterical. And again, to Methodikal and all of you guys' point, this is what makes the Hardcore Championship so fun to watch, right? Is to see these crazy bouts.
I reckon this was one of those matches, right, where they were like, oh yeah, we need something to put in between this and this match. Let's just stick this here. And then it turned out to be fucking one of the best matches on the card. I reckon that's how it went down.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of, this was actually the first title change of the WrestleMania as well, because in the end, of course, Kane hit Big Show with a boot and then a leg drop off of the stage to ultimately win the Hardcore Championship. Just wild shit you would never think you'd see. I mean,
Kane do a leg drop off the stage into a giant box that's got Raven and Big Show, and you can't see where he lands. You don't see what you just see him dive into a box first.
For me, it's all going to be about like I think Kane throwing Raven through that window. That was just fucking insane.
It was just wild, right? You just like, how, why, and who's paying for that? There's a lot of questions that come to mind. It truly, it was just a great match all around. Like I said, the Hardcore Championship. I would love a comeback, but I'm not sure that we're in this day and age. But
we have it. We've got the PG Championship.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Now let me ask you guys this: do you think AEW is gonna flip the script and throw in a hardcore-esque championship?
I don't think they will, because they'll get too much backlash as looking like they're copying the 24/7 championship, and I don't think it's worth the bad publicity for them, because obviously they are, as people are calling it, the Wednesday Night Wars. So they're in this sort of neck and neck with NXT. People flip-flop between shows each week, and I think long term it doesn't really make much sense to bring in something where WWE's trying to do the same sort of thing.
I want to add to that as well, that I think that, and this was okay, like I would have liked to have seen the Hardcore Championship continue, but I do think that it was necessary to get rid of like the amount of hardcore matches that they had. Because, like, to be honest, even if the matches weren't hardcore, they would often be like non-DQ. So you'd always see like steel chairs, tables, whatever, right? Sure. And I feel like it was kind of oversaturated. So I feel like with AEW now, it's great to have like these matches now and again, and they become more memorable. Like, for example, the Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley match was, I think it was Knocked Out match, they called it. That was like memorable because they went crazy with it, but it's like not every single match is like that. And I feel like if you would bring in a hardcore title into like AEW or even WWE now, I just think it would be like too much somehow. I don't know.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I think in this day and age, I think things are so, in the Attitude Era, there was this time in which the Hardcore Championship, to your point, made total sense. I think in this day and age, I think we need like an amateur wrestling championship where there are no rules but just wrestling.
I think it was more about the unpredictability of the championship. Like, you never knew when it was going to change and stuff. I mean, I think that's why when I saw the 24 championship like introduced, I got it straight away. Like, obviously they said like, yeah, it's to improve the third hour of Raw and stuff, but like that mentality of unpredictability, it can change at any point. Like, that brings excitement because it's like, what are they going to do next? Kind of thing.
That's so true. And speaking of another title that I absolutely loved was the WWF European Championship. That's right. That brings us into this next match, which was against Test versus the late great Eddie Guerrero. Of course, Eddie Guerrero was accompanied to the ring with Radical's Perry Saturn, who was wearing that wonderful furry hat that he was known to wear. And this, guys, I thought this was a great match, a very agile match. I really forgot how, really agile Test is. I mean, this man can move.
Yeah, it's a guy who was, I think, about 6'8", 6'9". He was incredible.
He was like 7 foot.
I think he was incredibly agile for a man his size, and I think as well he was so underrated in how good he was in the ring. Like, his matches against guys like Eddie and Chris Benoit was so good because he could work so well as being the big man. Trying to work down a smaller opponent.
I think he was just a victim of a highly saturated roster. I mean, if you look at like how many top guys were in that company at that time, like if we take Eddie Guerrero for a second, like, it's a while before he gets to the main event, but like a lot of big guys had to leave or move on before that was possible. So he was in the mid card for a while. Like, and Test went on to, I think, as long as like 2007 or 2008 in the company. But he was always kind of around the mid card. And I think that they never really saw him as like the main eventer, unfortunately. But he absolutely could have been. Maybe it was like the promo stuff. Maybe he just couldn't do that. I don't know.
I think you hit on a good point. And but of course, Latino Heat Eddie Guerrero does kill it in this match, but not by himself. He does, of course, have this great storyline with the Radicals. Dean Malenko comes in, of course, distracts the referee, and of course, Latino Heat took advantage. And of course, clobbered Test right in the face, and
won the European title belt with a 1-2-3.
I gotta say, just on a separate point as well, I still find it crazy that A, they got rid of the European Championship, and B, that they didn't bring it back. Like when I saw the UK NXT Championship, I was like, why didn't they just bring back the European? And like it would make sense as well from like so many perspectives. Like the fact that they're trying to move into other countries in Europe, the fact that they have like loads of European wrestlers on their roster, you know, the fact that they've got this UK base now, like there's so many reasons to bring it back, but no UK title. Like what?
I think if the NXT UK brand ever does take off, I do think it will be similar to the North American Championship, and they'll bring something. They'll rebrand it as the NXT European Championship and have it similar.
Kill me now. Yeah, that's such a WWE thing to do.
Well, I assume it'll be similar design, but instead of having the big WWF at the top, would be the NXT UK logo, would be my assumption.
I just remember, like, they did a classic photo shoot a couple of years back where they brought all the main roster guys and gave them, you know, so you'd have, like, Roman Reigns with the Winged Eagle, for instance. And there was a shot of Rusev with the European Championship, and it just looked so right. It was like, yes, that's what they need to do.
That's it. That is it. Yeah. It blows me away too. You know, I was born and raised in Germany, you may know, and it always blew me away that this European Championship was this mid-card title, despite being a continental championship, right? I've always thought that was a very ironic and funny thing. Obviously, the world is bigger than a continent, but I always thought that was interesting to be such a mid-card role.
I would much rather they would have. I mean, they never would have done this, but like scrapped the US title and just kept the European title.
You know, and I think that makes sense. I mean, there's, you know, and that's coming from someone in the U.S. I think there's an element of that would work.
It's weird, isn't it? Because like, if you compare like the Intercontinental title with the US title, like the Intercontinental probably has a bit more prestige. Yeah. Like in comparison with like previous like champions and stuff. Like you can make a case for the US title, but like the Intercontinental, I mean, come on, like
no question.
Perfect, Jericho, Rob Van Dam, like there's so many. I mean, Pat Patterson, you know what I mean?
Right.
This goes
epic, yeah. Because I do think there is an allure to international, right? Shit, they should just switch the NXT brands, just bring UK here and throw NXT over there, and then it'll feel fresh for everyone.
You know what it'd be good for? It would be a good way of training heels. Let's say you want to train your American heels. Bring them over to the UK, do the old, look at what we did in the war for you, kind of, just cheap heat, right? Build it up, because that's easy heat in the UK. You know, there's that like sort of
for sure
UK US rivalry, so it's perfect. You can just train all the heels there and do vice versa. You know, it's easy, it works. It's
for sure. Logical. And speaking of easy and American heels, that brings us into Kurt Angle in this next match versus Chris Benoit. Kurt Angle was a great heel to hate, and he came out into the audience taunting the Astrodome, and I'm sure Methodical, I'm sure you were pissed in the audience, frankly. You probably had a "you suck" sign.
What was that? Sorry to interrupt, but like I noticed that there was no "you suck" chants. I was like, what's going on?
I don't know when the "you suck" chants began. I'll be frank with you, because I thought the exact same thing rewatching. I'm like, when did this go? And it's a similar phenomenon with the "what" movement.
What?
It's a similar phenomenon with the "what" movement. I'm like, wait, when did "what" really become where we interchange this in every fucking segment in WWE, right?
I think the whole "you suck" thing started during the SmackDown Fist era, which started about a year or two after this WrestleMania. So it was more. I think it was more like between WrestleMania 19, like around that sort of era.
It's when he feuded with Edge. That was it. He held the sign up, didn't he, that said "you suck," and then the fans started chanting that at him, and then he was like, "Stop chanting it at me," and then that just stuck after that.
Yeah, this theme song just
perfect.
Boosted that.
It was such a great cliche person to play this role, this pompous gold medalist who thought everyone was below him. I really thought Kurt Angle is an exceptional heel. I of course love when he had his face moments, but his heel moments of course were wonderful. And of course this match against the Rabid Wolverine is no exception. I think this one was wicked awesome. I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. What do you guys think about the match?
For me, if I can go first, I think this is the best actual wrestling match on the show. There's better storyline moments and there's better extreme moments, especially with TLC too. But I think this is probably the best pure wrestling match you get on the entire WrestleMania 17 card. And for me, being a fan of that sort of the grappling and technician sort of style, I loved it. It's one of my favorite matches from tonight.
A lot of takeaways for me with this. I completely agree with that opinion. Definitely the best pure wrestling match. I thought that like they did the match very like cleverly as well, where they started, you know, amateur and then obviously feeding into Kurt Angle's heel tactics of like, you know, he stopped, you know, actually, I don't want to call it fighting fairly, but he stopped doing the amateur stuff and started brawling with Benoit and turned it into like a pro wrestling match kind of thing. So it was like clever.
No doubt.
But like, just to take it on a bit of a dark turn, just real quick, I gotta say it was very difficult watching Benoit. I always find it difficult watching Benoit matches like now. So I try to just look at it like purely from the, you know, work perspective, you know, like just look at the in-ring, don't think about it. And you know, he was definitely like one of the best in the ring. I mean, I don't think I ever saw a bad Benoit match or Angle match, to be honest. And putting them together was always, you know, they had several feuds over the years and they were always excellent. So it's kind of a surefire bet feud.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really important point. I think, you know, with Chris Benoit, I think it's, you know, being a fan for as long, you know, as a lot of us have been, and it's tough to watch Benoit in the ring from the standpoint of knowing the history. And I think this is something very prevalent in today's world. It is so difficult to disassociate the talent of a star, a musician, a whatever it may be, with their real life, you know, escapades, for the lack of better words. And I think that's really tough with Benoit as well. I'm with you as well. It's tough to watch him in the ring, you know, not that he's not an exceptional technical wrestler, but man, it's tough to not get a visual, right? It's tough not to immediately think of that horrifying story.
It's not just that as well. Like there's always like a kind of a line where if it gets crossed, you're like obviously with Benoit it's different, but like if we take a more recent example, like Hulk Hogan as an example, yeah, like I feel like he kind of passed the point of no return, and like even though he apologized and everything for it, like he's not been forgiven. Do you know what I mean? Like any arena he goes to, you can hear massive, loud boos.
That's right.
And like I think, you know, it's weird because I don't actually think he's racist. I think it was just kind of a piss poor choice on his part, you know, and being under the influence of drugs and stuff, you know. But still doesn't change the fact that, like, you know, your fans look up to you, you're a role model, and when you do something like that, you know, it ruins it. And obviously with Benoit, you know, it's like you said, it's that disassociation. Like the person, we don't really need to say anything. The wrestler, like one of the best that's ever been.
No doubt. And when you start thinking about all these additional things at play, you know, it's just a wild story in the history of our industry. You know, I think it's a, you know, really, really sad, and it at least it's nice that we're able to look back on matches like this and see the technical style that he had and the incredible skill. I mean, I think that goes without saying. Anything else you other two gents want to add to this match?
I agree on the fact that it can be difficult to watch these matches, but I think when you look at it for what it is easily the most technical match on the night. And I love the story they had going into this match as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with Chris Benoit making Kurt Angle tap out a few weeks before, but the referee didn't see it, so it didn't officially count. And Kurt Angle sort of losing his mind in a way where he keeps like constantly, like you see earlier in the night, if you watch the full show, that Edge and Christian come backstage and see him, and Kurt Angle's just focused, just watching replays of him tapping out, and it's just lost in this. And eventually, the entire time on commentary, they're building up to like they're only going to focus on submissions. They're only going to focus on submissions.
Real quick, you hit on a good point. So when Angle was watching himself tap out, right, and things like that, I have to ask you guys. Technically speaking, Angle asked this question: if there is no ref present and there was no official match, and you tap out, is it a tap out?
Yes.
I disagree. If no one rings the bell, you didn't officially tap out.
Yeah, but like you technically you did.
On a technicality, yes, but officially you did not.
No, that's really funny. I thought that was a great bit to your point. But yeah, I digress. I just thought it was great. He's like, is it real? It's like, you tap, man.
Yeah, I love how they had that storyline going into the match. And then the way that the match ends is obviously Kurt Angle does tap. He taps the crossface. The referee is knocked down, so Benoit tries to get the referee up. Angle then hits an angle slam and then rolls him up with the tights to get a pinfall victory.
Yep.
And I love that, the dynamic of it's only about submissions, but as soon as Angle sees a chance to win, as he's been behind in a lot of the matchup, he takes it.
That match was truly riddled in tension and technicality. And you know what I thought was ironic too? I thought there was this beautiful irony of them both being in this red, white, and blue, in Texas. I just thought there was just something to be said about that match. It was just this kind of ironically American match, although Benoit is from Canada.
Oh yeah.
But it felt very American. So yeah, no, I thought that was an incredible match. And then to your point, later in another segment, Angle's doing an interview, and then Benoit attacks Angle from the back and locks him into that crippler crossface. So he certainly gets his revenge in the end.
I actually think their 2002 feud was a bit better, where they became a tag team, and I thought that was like much more memorable, like in terms of the heel work and stuff, and like forcing them together, and just that whole era of SmackDown in general. But,
yeah, I'll be honest, I totally forgot about that until you just said that. I totally forgot about that entire storyline, but you're exactly right.
SmackDown 6, brother.
That's right. That's incredible. Now, speaking of another incredible match, one of my all-time favorite women's superstars in all of history, Chyna took on Ivory for the WWF Women's Championship. So, of course, the Right to Censor's own Ivory came out to the wonderful Right to Censor music.
Brilliant,
isn't it?
It really is. What a great way to hate them, right? I mean, there's nothing worse than an alarm going off. So, I suppose that's
I think you saw that work really well in recent times with Tommaso Ciampa in NXT when he first returned, having no theme music, and then when he did come back, it was instantly just massive sirens going off.
Yep.
I think it's just an easy way because you don't want to hear it. You don't want that. So it works so perfectly with a team that was built to be hated.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. Now, of course, Ivory took on the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna. And I think this was the peak of Chyna's career. I was mesmerized by Chyna's entrance, her outfit.
Yeah.
I always love that little cannonball entrance. I always think that's a fascinating thing. But I think this purple wrestling look was truly one of the most iconic moments in her history. And of course, winning then ultimately the women's championship match. There's not much to say about this match other than she just pummeled Ivory. But I thought this was a nice feel-good moment. To your point earlier, it's a fairy tale moment for WrestleMania and for Chyna. Any additional thoughts on that match specifically?
Chyna for the Hall of Fame.
No doubt.
No doubt at all. I think there's one interesting takeaway when you look at the match. The match itself only lasts 2 minutes and 39 seconds, which by today's standards would never ever happen again. I think that it's the only women's match on the card, and if you look at wrestling nowadays, it kind of shows. This match is a good sort of point because Chyna was almost seen as one of the guys for quite a long time. Obviously, she was an Intercontinental Champion for a while, and obviously the ninth wonder of the world. They saw her as more than just a woman for a lot of the time as her run lasted in the company. Looking now, you'd never see a women's match get just 2 minutes and 39 seconds.
Just adding on to the tail end of that as well, like for the next sort of 2 years after this, they were really pushing women's wrestling. It was getting more and more prevalent. I think they even had like headline actually maybe a bit longer, maybe up to about 2006-ish. So a big period they were really pushing it seriously. And then they went into like this decline period of having the Divas Championship and just not being taken seriously again. So it's very weird because like whenever they talk about like these wrestlers and they do Trish Stratus's and stuff like that, like it was a very memorable time for women's wrestling, but like it took a long time to get to where we are now. And I always found it weird that they kind of regressed when they made so much progress in like the upward direction at this point.
I think even watching back even this WrestleMania, I think there were some moments that I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, how cringeworthy from a standpoint of just respect for all genders, right? I mean, there are just some moments even in this, especially in this next match we'll talk about, that I'm just like, are we really stripping down this poor woman to her bra and panties? Right? But again, there's these...
It's such good shit!
My God! But yeah, I think there's an element of that that's really fascinating. But that brings us to arguably one of the best matches of the evening. Father and son, Shane and Vince in the McMahon Street Fight. God, I mean, I'm always I admire the McMahon family for just immersing themselves into this industry as much as they have. They are the industry, but I love the McMahon family feud. From the moment Shane, quote unquote, took over WCW, and then ultimately ECW with the Alliance angle. I just think this whole thing was fascinating, and I can't tell you how pissed I was to watch Shane McMahon roll into WrestleMania 17 in a fucking WCW limousine. I am WWF through and through. Of course, I watch WCW, right? I mean, there would be, but of course, seeing that just, oh my goodness. What were you guys' thoughts when you guys saw the whole WCW angle, that moment, before we get into the match?
When I saw that Shane beat him to the punch, and he's there at that final WCW event. And then Shane he just comes out and like, I just bought WCW. Now what you gonna do? Vince, his face, classic. Honestly, I really thought. I mean, I know there were like a lot of mixed reviews about the whole Alliance angle, but I personally loved it up until like near the end of it, because the beginning had so much steam going on. I loved how he just strolled in and just bought WCW right from under him.
I found it very fascinating how they kind of started this feud, with Shane McMahon kind of perceived as the babyface in the situation. And then immediately after this match, they started pushing towards, McMahon being a babyface, which was kind of crazy because he's always pretty much been a heel, but he has had spurts of being a babyface. And like this, the idea of being, well, it was more like WWF is the face, if you like, and he's obviously being the leader of the company, it would be like the leader of that charge. So I found that very interesting, and obviously at this point he's in full heel mode. But yeah, I guess still technically, even though like WCW had ended, they were also kind of the heels, the bad guys. It was a very confusing situation.
It was, because ultimately you're, in this match, in a weird way, you're rooting for Shane, and you're like, wait, am I rooting Team WCW Alliance?
Yeah.
One thing that you hit on, I think, would have been a really fun, angle to take with the WWF WCW angle. I always thought it would be hysterical, and a really lovely storyline, because Vince was such a heel, for Vince to put WWF up for sale. Shane buys it, and Vince buys WCW, right? Because wouldn't you just hate that Vince went to his competitor, right? I think there's a lot more at work there, pride, everything like that. But I just think that would have been the ultimate heel turn. It's like, wait, Vince is WCW? Holy shit. And I think that angle, to your point, Methodical, it fizzled out. But I think it really could have given it some steam, because, McMahon obviously doesn't let up. But I think, just a little sidebar there that I think could have been a fun storyline. But going right into this match, of course, this match was reffed, of course, by hardcore legend, the one and only Mick Foley. I mean, one of the best, right? I mean,
such a lovely dude. I had the honor to meet him once, like a meet and greet he had, and he's such a lovely dude.
Oh.
He just seems real down and genuine, I mean, just from the things you see on Twitter and things like that, his videos, he just seems like a real good guy. So it's real cool to hear that firsthand from you.
He's honestly, like, out of all the wrestlers I've met and spoke to, he's up there with one of the nicest and most genuine. Even though I only spoke to him personally for like a minute or so, he's just such a down and honest, genuine person.
That's awesome.
I think he was the perfect choice as well as a special guest in this, because like, as you kind of said, he's like this like real life good guy as well, and he's like, for instance, when he said in the pre-match interview sort of earlier in the show that he's gonna call it right down the middle, and
right.
But when he said it, like, even though he was joking, like you did kind of believe him. You're like, yeah, no, if anyone would call it down the middle, it would be him. And obviously they tell the story of Vince kind of like punking him out and stuff, and then he retaliates afterwards. But it's like he doesn't turn on anyone before that. You know what I mean?
Agree. Yeah, he has to have a valid reason, and all of our conscience to turn on him, right? He's fair, but anyone would clobber knock the guy if that happened, right? So similar to a lot of these wrestlers, I personally, I think this guy has a love-hate relationship in the fandom, but I personally love Shane McMahon. I think his guts and ability to drive a story, I think, are wonderful. I know that is a very controversial opinion, but I do. I think this match was no exception. I thought he really, I think he, at some point in his career, I think he had something to prove. And I think this was one of those matches. Of course, McMahon was escorted to the ring by Stephanie McMahon, and she was in that. You guys remember that jumpsuit, the daddy's girl embellished with crystals?
Yeah.
Oh, it's awful.
Right. That's just it. It's just bad, right? And another person who just immersed herself in the industry, of course. But of course, it was all street fight rules, basically. And I got to tell you, one of my favorite moments of that specific match was not only the Linda McMahon angle in the storyline, but of course was when little Shane O'Mac missed his little elbow on, of course, the infamous poor Spanish announce table.
It's always the Spanish announce table. Poor bloody Spanish announcers.
We should hit on that for those listeners of the pod who are not wrestling fans necessarily. There's this story of infamy in WWF, WWE. The Spanish announcer table always ends up being the one that just gets destroyed. No one really knows why. I don't think there's really any history behind it, but it's just fascinating. So that's what we're referencing in case you hear us talk about the poor Spanish announce table.
I reckon it's to do with the camera work. I think it's purely just because it's the better camera angle.
Yeah, I could definitely see that for sure.
The hard cam, actually, the hard cam is always on the it's always in the same position. That was one thing I remember watching in a documentary years ago. I don't know if it was specific to, it might have been specific to WWF, WWE, but it was said that like every event they've ever done, they've always had the hard cam in the exact same spot. So
there you go.
Yeah, and then like obviously if they were filming the closer announcer table on the right hand side, it's not going to give as good of a view or a visual as like. And I know they have like several cameras, but like if you think that they're all kind of positioned at that point, you can quickly get the angles you want. So it's like, ring view angle and then bottom view from, looking at the top rope from the floor and so on.
No doubt about that. And, and on the flip side, I think there's a lot of visibility and accolades that came with that, right? I think all of us became very aware of the Spanish announce team, even though we don't listen to the Spanish announcement, right? But I became very aware with these two personalities because they were constantly berated by these poor superstars. Now, this match, as you guys all know, unraveled. Of course, Trish comes in with the wheelchair with Linda McMahon, who's supposedly on an extra dose of medicine, so she's drugged up. I cannot believe that this was an actual storyline in national television.
Different time, man. Different time.
And that's what I was hitting on earlier. It's just wild to me. Some of the shit that I was watching, I'm like, the storyline is this man is drugging his wife so that he basically can have a mistress. This is wild.
Tame. I mean, look at what they did after this, like Katie Vick,
yes.
Or the years prior, the hand thing, Mae Young and the birth of the hand, the abortion angle with Terry Reynolds. I mean, Jesus, like this is tame, I think, in comparison to what they've done.
It no doubt is, but I got to tell you, I watched this one recently with a non-wrestling fan, and watching this match unfold was like, what in God's... Is she in a chair in the middle of the ring dozing off? Yes. Wait, is she not actually drugged? No. Which brings us obviously to this transition.
One thing I'd like to quickly comment on is the acting ability of Linda McMahon, because I don't personally know how. It was almost like, I think about 3 or 4 months this storyline ran of her just sitting perfectly still, nothing phasing her. There could be a grown man just thrown right in front of her eyes and she wouldn't flinch. And I don't understand how she did it personally. Like, I was rewatching this match with my brother the other day, and we were both mentioning like how incredible is it that she would just be able to sit so still for such a long period of time and not do anything. I don't understand how she did it. Yeah, clearly.
Sure.
Clearly.
Yeah. And just being so immersed in their character work. I mean, truly, the McMahons are a very rare breed when it comes to character work and acting, frankly. They are able to just immerse themselves into this wild storyline. And you're right, Linda didn't flinch for months,
I'd actually argue like 2 things here. One, that Vince McMahon is one of the greatest like heels of all time, and also that I think Shane McMahon has an amazing ability to play babyface and heel. Because I remember when he came back in 2016, he was like, so amazingly over. And when I heard that he might be turning heel, I was like, really? Like, oh, that'll be weird. And then he managed to successfully make everyone hate him, even though everyone is so clued up on the fact that, wrestling is staged and all that. Like, still, he had genuine heat and everything. Like, I guess it was kind of more like go away heat, like, but still, it's pretty impressive.
All heat is good heat, though. All heat is good heat.
No doubt about it, and I think that's an important thing. I think, not to digress too much, it's like this King Corbin guy. I think there's an element of like genuine, like, fuck this guy, but we know it's all part of the storyline. And I think it's so funny. Shane McMahon is one of those people that Vince we love to hate, and Shane has this really weird thing in the industry that people genuinely don't like him for taking up screen time, which I think is really crazy. As a McMahon, right? I have no problem having a McMahon on my television. I'll just be frank, because I do. I think the family is fascinating and can really drive story. But that's not to say other talent certainly doesn't deserve that time. Yeah,
I gotta say I disagree with that. I think it always depends on like I'm gonna say something controversial, but I feel that way about Stephanie McMahon. I feel like every time I've ever seen her on screen, I wince. I just don't get it. I think she's excellent as a businesswoman, but on screen, I just don't like the character. And even though she plays a heel, it's not like I don't like her because of that. I just it doesn't click for me. Whereas with Vince and Shane, it always clicked. It was like, yeah, no, they should be on screen and this makes sense and they're getting this person over and it's logical to this storyline. But with Stephanie, she always just kind of like, if you take like the Hunter Helmsley era as an example, like I always just wanted to hear Hunter talk. I didn't want to hear her really screechy, annoying voice. And like, it did kind of work. There was some fun stuff with like her and Jericho and stuff, but it was just really painful sometimes. And like, she actually wrestled for the championship and was a champion and everything. But like, I never really felt like she was really like part of it, like in the way that Vince and Shane were. Like, I don't know. That's just my thing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there for sure. I always felt like, and maybe this is my own psychological damage. I always thought Shane had something to prove, whereas I feel like Stephanie always had a platform. And again, not that Shane didn't. I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. But I always felt like Shane had to go out there and prove something to not only the industry, the fans, but I think ultimately his dad, And I think that's one thing that, for me personally, sets him apart from his sister Steph. Not that she didn't do that, but again, there's a different element, right? He had to win the fans over. He had to do crazy shit, time in and time out.
Not many people know about him as well. He actually started out as a referee and
that's right.
Paid his dues like massive like any other guy. So like, while he might have had some heat, like if you ask any of those people that were in that locker room, like he basically is referred to as one of the boys, and he earned it. Like he like became respected because he became one of the boys. So it's like. It wasn't ever given it, whereas I feel like maybe Stephanie was kind of just given it. She never really like won.
I don't ever think it was that reason. I think the reason that people have this disdain to it is because she never, even though she was a wrestler and she did all these things, she was never like, it's a McMahon. It's almost like, oh, you'd never want to trust a McMahon. But then when you saw Shane, you'd see Shane jumping off of the SummerSlam sign or off top of the Hell in a Cell, or he'd be doing shooting star presses out of nowhere. Like he was always doing these like amazing things that people would, even if they disliked the McMahon, that always gravitate towards him. And although Stephanie's been involved in some pretty great matches, like I think the match a couple of years ago at WrestleMania, where she teamed with Triple H against Ronda and Kurt Angle, is one of the best matches in recent WrestleMania history. I do think that because she never had that sort of on-screen, like she never did these amazing daredevil moments, people always look at Stephanie differently and almost see her as less than Shane, because Shane would do all these amazing things on screen.
But the thing is, like, okay, your point is more that, his in-ring ability sold it. And I agree with that, but I don't feel like it's the same with Steph. Like, okay, it's fine. Yeah, she wasn't the wrestler. That's fine. But, like, I don't think her mic skills were anyway on par with, like, Shane's in-ring.
I agree with
character.
That. I understand that.
That's kind of what I mean. I I think she should have been like more of a backstage kind of thing. I just
Well, she is really. That's the thing. I think it's just because obviously with Vince, especially more in recent years with Vince's age and leading into the Triple H and Stephanie sort of like the Triple H like running NXT era, I do think that's why she was almost brought in to be this sort of to be on screen much more, which we saw loads with the Authority angles.
But it's like, I think there's a bit of an ego thing there. Like, for example, have you ever noticed the opening credits for WWE whenever you watch a pay-per-view or anything now? It's got her image from WrestleMania in it, like a big portion of like maybe like 3 or 4 seconds of her. And she's always featured prominently, even though she's not a regular superstar, she's not regularly on the programming. And she's even said like in the past about, you know, always when she spoke about the slap being like her finishing move, and I was like, she's got to be joking, right? This isn't for real. Like, this isn't like a genuine like, yes, because whenever, okay, this is what I don't like, right? She kind of goes on this thing of like, yeah, you know, trailblazing, which is a term I fucking hate now because it's so overused. But like this whole thing of, yeah, we're setting a movement, we're trailblazing, we're doing this, we're doing that, and it's like, yeah, they are. You're not. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I hate to be mean to her because she is a lovely woman in real life, but like with the stuff she's doing in the ring and when she's like doing the WWE like corporate stuff, it bugs me big time.
No doubt, and I think that definitely with Steph and other elements of there's a huge political balance, right? Too. Anyone who's been in, you know, obviously the corporate world mixed with the arts, which I think everyone on this specific podcast has, I think that's a tough balance. But I think you're right. I think, you know, I'm not sure that I would be, I'm not sure that I would love to see Stephanie McMahon do a swanton bomb, but
I would.
I do think, because I think there's an element to that. Don't get me wrong, it'd be fascinating, but I do think the fact that the slap is her finishing move, I think says
that's
it
not
all.
a finishing move.
No, but if you wind it up real hard, it is, right? No, I'm just kidding.
It's like wind it back real far.
That's right.
Just go in.
Like a softball pitch, you know.
Round it up real tight, like throw that in there.
Stephanie McMahon with the slap.
Look at the carnage! Look at the carnage!
Oh. But yeah, that match, you guys, was epic, and I'm always fascinated by the coast to coast by Shane McMahon, right? Him going from one ring post to the other. I think it's one of the most.
You mean the Van Terminator?
The Van Terminator. That's right. But I think that move does not get enough credit. I don't know that I could even make it halfway across the ring, let alone a fourth. But I just think that air is always really, really impressive.
Yeah, he's done it like so many different ways, and he's always, yeah, it's a good move, isn't it? It's pretty impressive.
That was like my favorite part of the whole match right there, coast to coast.
No doubt about it. And Shane, like I said, I just dig him inside and out of the ring. Now, that match was family drama at its best. And I got to tell you, one of the most iconic WrestleMania moments in my history. And I just love that they drive that storyline home. You know, I mean, we all are rooting for one person in that match. And it certainly is not Vince McMahon. So I think it's fascinating. And you mentioned Carnage. Tables, Ladders, and Chairs 2.
Oh my god.
Oh man. Okay, so I think all of us, without question, have a deep, deep love and passion for this match. But really quickly, of course, the second Tables, Ladders, and Chairs had much hype to live up for, and boy, did it deliver. The TLC bouts are among my absolute favorite. And the inaugural TLC match, actually, as you guys know, was held in 2000 at the WWE SummerSlam pay-per-view. And that TLC actually changed the landscape, really, of tag team and hardcore wrestling as a whole, you know. That match included, of course, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. And they had a rematch for WrestleMania 17 in the Reliant Astrodome for, of course, the WWF Tag Team Championships. So let's start it off. What do you think about TLC 2 at WM17?
One of the best.
No doubt about that.
Edge and Hardy Boys, like they stole the entire match.
Yes, I mean they went in. I've been watching a lot of those older pay-per-views too. The Dudley Boys got a ton of airtime. I just censored myself in case you're wondering what that hard shh was. But they get a shitload of airtime, and well deserved, of course. But now, of course, the Dudleys come in as the incumbent champions, and of course they take on the Hardys and Edge and Christian. Now, you mentioned Mick Foley earlier. I actually had the opportunity when I was a young little lad, young little Jon Jon. I actually had the pleasure and honor of meeting Jeff Hardy.
What?
Jeff Hardy, you guys, I got to tell you, was one of the kindest people I have ever met. And I know he has had a lot of turmoil in his life with a lot of different substances and hurt and all that. But I got to tell you, he was... I remember sitting at this guardrail in the backstage area of this WWE live event. And wrestlers were I remember Hardcore Holly was just, he just pummeled past us, didn't give us the time of day. Lita which was really funny. And of course, I mean, no disrespect to, Hardcore Holly, but that was interesting. You see people like, Undertaker's car would go through, and then the Hardys showed up. And Matt and Lita, I didn't catch them, but they were rolling through. And Jeff Hardy stopped. It was so wild. And I said, Jeff, my little Kodak disposable camera. I said, Jeff, can I please get a picture with you? I love you. And he goes, of course, man. And he turned and he said that had that North Carolina accent. Of course, man. Why don't let's take a picture? And so of course we took the picture. I still have that little Polaroid picture.
Oh, dude, you gotta put that in the pod, like screenshot.
I definitely will. It was. I gotta tell you, it was the most. It just changed my life, And to think that. I was this young kid. He did not need to give me the time of day. And given what he was going through in life, right? I'm surprised he even gave me the time of day. But one thing I will tell you is he's always been really, really great with the fans. And my personal experience, it's just one of the coolest memories. I haven't had an opportunity to meet many wrestlers in person, and Jeff was one of them. And it was just epic. I'm getting chills just talking about it. But
I gotta say, just on a side note, I've just noticed that people in general that go through like more tougher stuff in life tend to like be a lot nicer because they just know how dark it can get, and they're just like a bit more. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
I agree completely. It's that it's like the theater masks, right? In order to see the light, you have to see the dark. Comedy, tragedy, right? Yeah. You can't see the light without the dark, and I think you hit on that really, really well. And yeah, I think some of the kindest people are, people who've seen some of the worst of times, and that is no exception for Jeff Hardy, and of course Matt Hardy associated, being his brother and all that fun stuff. But this match, folks, transitioning back into it, of course I was all Team Jeff Hardy and Team Matt Hardy, Hardy Boys. So this of course was a fun match to watch. There were so many epic moments which we're going to hit on, I'm sure. But they just went balls to the wall. Now, again, those of you who are not wrestling fans, a TLC match is very, very simple. All that will occur in this match is there's two titles because they're the tag team championships, and they're hanging above the ring. Okay, and there's going to be three teams, and they can utilize tables, ladders, and chairs in any capacity, whether it be weapons, setting them up to ultimately get the championship belts. So that's what we're talking about here. In case you're wondering why people are climbing fucking ladders or falling through tables, this is literally part of the match rules. So let's get right into it. So the Dudleys didn't start, the Dudleys didn't hold back anything and just got started right away with a ladder. But really, the high momentum match from the start.
I think this match, in my opinion, is one of the best TLC matches they've ever done. And as I said earlier, this match has a special place in my heart. It's one of the first ever matches I ever watched. When we were little, there was an event on at my school where people could bring in stuff to sell one weekend, and some family was selling a VHS tape, if I can get the words out, of the entire TLC feud. So me and my mum. My brother was really interested in wrestling. He's a few years older than me. So he bought it, but then never watched it. So one day I just put it in our TV and was just enthralled as a 5-year-old rewatching the TLC feud and just watching men be thrown through tables. So the third match I ever watched was this TLC match. And like you as well, Jeff Hardy has ever since been my favorite wrestler. And probably always will be. I think it's a testament to these 6 guys, and rewatching it just shows the impact they've had on the entire industry.
I'm gonna say as well, like watching back the entire pay-per-view and this wrestling in general, like obviously I was enamored with it, just like you were. I was a kid at the time, and I just found it all fascinating and amazing. But obviously looking at it through my eyes now, after being a fan for 20 years and, you know, sort of accumulating all this knowledge about wrestling now, I actually was more drawn to like just how intelligent the match is in terms of like how it's constructed, and like how there's never like a boring moment. Do you know what I mean? You know, like in a standard wrestling match, you've got not necessarily boring moments, but you've got like transitional kind of points where you're going from one sequence to the next or something, right? But with this, it's like ongoing, non-stop, and it's all logical. Like, for instance, okay, you've got this issue of like, well, why don't they just run up the ladder right away and do this, right? But, like, they kind of tell the story in a clever way, like, oh, no, they want to like finish these guys off before they can do this, or, you know, they want to try this or that. And like, I was always just enamored with that, and like every single match that these guys ever had, not just with each other, but in just different capacities, was always good. Like, for instance, like Jeff Hardy versus Undertaker on that episode of Raw one time, you know, like it's like whenever you have one of these guys in a match that's TLC or ladders or whatever, it's always going to be absolutely excellent. And it's one of the reasons why they always used Christian in the Money in the Bank matches, you know. It's because like he just knows, like they have this understanding of how to do it in a sensible way where no one's going to get hurt and it's going to be memorable.
No doubt. You know, and don't you wonder, I mean, yeah, I love the legacy of TLC, you know, but obviously the Dudleys, you know, their legacy was really known for the table side of things. The Hardys, of course, the ladders. You know, wouldn't you hate to be the fucking chair guys? Now, they did it, right? They branded it with the concerto and nailed it. But I remember thinking about that consciously back in the day. I'm like, that would suck to be the chair people. And then another question I'll pose to you guys. What if it wasn't chairs? What else could it be, right? And I think there's a myriad of different things you could think of, but
light tubes,
you know,
or thumbtacks.
You know, or even if it wasn't just chairs, what if it was just rolly chairs, right?
Oh, can I just say, just on a side note, right? How ridiculous were the trash cans?
Absolutely.
Do you remember how fake they were?
Absolutely, so thin and it was like aluminum foil. Like it's
like if you would legitimately hit someone with a real American like trash can, you would kill them.
No doubt about it.
I know, no exaggeration. Like you would legitimately kill them.
I know it's one thing that we always brush under the rug too as wrestling fans, right? The logic piece sometimes. Sometimes we're really critical of this has to make sense. But why were there baking pans underneath the WWF ring? I never understood why. It's like, are we gonna make some baked fish here in a few minutes? But maybe. So with that,
I remember one match. There was like it was one of those crazy free. I think it might have been WrestleMania 2000 actually. It was that you know, like 30 guys in a ring, everyone going crazy kind of thing. And like I remember a spot where I think Hardcore Holly hit Crash Holly over the head with a jar of sweets.
No, that was a running thing for a while too, because then JR hit Taz with it. Remember, with the JR Lawler thing, and then. Yeah, but it's just the candy had made a comeback a couple times. I'm like, why is there a jar of candy over here? Just a mason jar of candy. Maybe it's for JR. But of course, JR really was riled up this entire match. I think again, that's one of the things that makes a good wrestling match. Not of course not only of course the wonderful wrestling, but of course it was good commentating, you know. And I thought this one was fun. A lot of the barcodes, oh my god, and I just think that makes it.
I gotta say, like just on that note, like this era for commentary, you know, they were all excellent. Even like Michael Cole, who I can't really stand now, he was excellent with Taz. But like, I don't know, these days I tend to just tune out the commentary for WWE. I just turn it down or something. I just can't stand listening to it. It's not the same.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There was this regularity having JR and the King, even though, to your point, you know, Michael Cole and Taz were taking over SmackDown. You know, there was just this consistency that we felt normal. There was this normalcy to having these guys, and frankly, they were great in the industry. You know, I think the hard thing for me today, as much as I love some of these commentators, I just think there's so many of them. You know, I think it's and I think there's an element of character branding, right? You know, JR with the hat, you know, King with the crown. I think
they just need to give him more freedom, though. Like, okay, if you take like Corey Graves with what's that guy's name? Byron Saxton, yeah?
Yeah.
Like sometimes when when Corey Graves is like ripping the shit out of Saxton, it's actually really entertaining. But they water it down and it's very few and far between. And sometimes it's like too forced. Like you just know he's being told like, oh, clown Saxton, say this about Saxton. Like, you know.
Yep. Yeah, that's so true. I think you're right. I think it definitely can make or break a match, and this was definitely, you know, one of the golden eras of commentating, no doubt. And in this match, you know, I think this match was one of my favorites. I always love the setup of the tables and knowing that someone is going to go through them eventually. One of the iconic ones, of course, was the 4 tables on the ring entrance panel, which of course resulted in. We'll get into that in just a few minutes, but Bubba Ray falling through those due to a twist at the end of the match. And of course, we saw epic things like the Swanton bomb off of the giant ladder outside of the ring, which, you know, if you were looking at the ladder outside the ring, it was the exact same height as the one inside of the ring. So, you know, I'd say that 20 foot drop. What's funny, too, I don't know if you guys ever noticed on those Swanton bomb moves that Jeff does outside of the ring, there's always one table or one ladder that never manages to give. And it occurred in this match, and it happened, you know, in a later TLC match at WrestleMania, where he did a Swanton bomb, and only one of the ladders broke, and the other one was just kind of dangled there, so the rest was like, oh, I'll just drop off then.
Here's the really funny thing as well, where, I don't know if you noticed, he does the Swanton. I think possibly he lands on Spike Dudley and Rhino, right? But there's a sort of a quick thing where Rhino kind of like brushes him off real quick in a kind of way like, please get off me, man, that fucking hurts.
I didn't catch that, but that's funny.
So
because with that spot in specific, there's 2 tables and Rhino's on one and Spike Dudley's on the other.
Yeah.
And Spike's on the one that's further away from the ladder, and the ladder was positioned too close to the first table, so the first table doesn't break, and Rhino I'm assuming his stomach gets smashed by Jeff's head. The power doesn't really go through the ladder, through the table, shall I say, and then he just has to like collapse down through through Spike and Jeff to sort of get down to the floor.
Yeah, and another thing as well is I'm impressed that Jeff always pulled off those and got like the right spot with them, because obviously when he's doing it off the top rope or something like that, there's a bit of a push and a jump, which kind of pushes him like further in the ring. Do you know what I mean? So like if the guy is maybe let's say a meter or 2 away, he can kind of get that projection right. But on the ladder, he pretty much needs to like not even really like jump, but kind of like fall in the right position. If you know what I mean.
That's right, yeah. No, there was, I think you make a good point, and there was a point in the match, and I don't know what it was going to be, but I think about the potential of this moment, and I don't know where he was going with it. But if you guys remember correctly, I think it was with him and Christian, and there was 3 ladders set up kind of on the turnbuckle towards diagonal, and he kind of jumped on each ladder kind of parkour style, and then the 3rd ladder kind of went, you know, hobnob situation. And then he ultimately grabbed onto the title belt, where we have one of the most iconic moments.
Yeah.
But I wonder
was
what
so
that
sick.
was. Right, wasn't it? Okay, let's get into it now. Fuck it. Let's talk about that moment. So he fumbled over that. He grabs onto that little rope with the title belts, and ultimately Edge spears Jeff Hardy 20 feet in the air at WrestleMania 17. I mean,
judging by how they set that up, I think it completely went to plan, apart from the final ladder. I think that the only plan was probably just for him to just walk across them, and then he gets to the top and then gets speared straight away. But they still went with that spot, and yeah, it's like I watched it back and I was like, oh wow, I guess that's the only fuck up in the match. But then it doesn't matter because this amazing spot like goes afterwards. So it's just like instantly.
And it made the match, right? Because I don't think there's certain, you know, and I by no means I'm dogging a good match, but when the choreography is so on point that nothing is, you know, unpredictable, I think those are the fun elements of the matches. And you guys hit on it, when you don't quite go through the table, or if you just barely miss and your elbow's in someone's rib. Those are the matches that are like, oh, that was not planned, and it couldn't have been. When we all know, of course, you know, this stuff may or may not be scripted. Allegedly.
I also like the fact that like it does not every spot has to be like how do I put this, like amazing. Like for instance, there's a spot where I think it's one of the first or second move that Spike Dudley does. He does a bulldog off the top rope, or I think he calls it a Dudley drop, doesn't he?
Dudley death drop.
Dudley
That's
Death
right.
Drop. Yeah, yeah. And then the second one that he does is he takes the guy off the apron on outside onto the through the table. And it was just a small little move, but like they go straight through the table, and it was just really smooth, well done. It was a fun little spot. And okay, maybe it's not as memorable as the Jeff Hardy spot. You know what I mean? It's nice little. Doesn't have to be flashy, but it's fun, and it was added something to it.
Absolutely. I thought those, you hit on them, and we hit it a little bit earlier. Those entrances towards the end, those interferences by Lita, Spike Dudley, and Rhino, as much as you're like, God damn it, I thought really were a nice addition, especially that everyone kind of got their time to shine.
I love the ending of the match as well, how Rhino, obviously who's the lackey for Edge and Christian, he gets Christian on his shoulders and walks up the ladder so Christian can get the belts, obviously because Christian's a legal competitor in the match, he can't do it himself. I love that's how the match is won, is by one of the other competitors being the last one that left wasn't too hurt by the table spot.
No, I was going to say the clever thing about that as well is that it enables the storyline to continue. So they can just be like immediately like, oh, we won the titles, we're the best, we're the bad guys, like the heels, right? And then they can be like, well, you didn't win it fairly because you got help from this guy, and here's the footage. And then, you know what I mean? It's like an intelligent way of continuing the storyline.
And that I think is, I mentioned this in one of my reaction videos. I think this is the only way that you can have this match end, right? Because they're all such iconic tag teams. I'm not sure that you can have the Dudley Boys, the Hardy Boys come out on top at a huge WrestleMania like this, right? Because I really think that would have cemented their history even more so. And I think, to your point, to be able to drive storyline, feeling that, it really sucked. But from a storyline standpoint, it rocked, right? You're like, God, what a bunch of D-bags just cheating to win, right?
You say that, though, but like, I mean, I think even at the time, it was difficult to hate any of these teams. I mean, they're all iconic, even at this point. And like, there were other tag teams in the division, but these are the main ones that you think about when you think about that golden era of, like, I guess, tag teams in the Attitude Era, at least.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And I think there's an element, and I use this term very loosely, but an element of diversity that these three teams bring, right? From the standpoint of they are different than your traditional wrestler, right? And I think that was really fascinating. And I think, speaking for all of us, maybe potentially, I think we watch this match and all of us on some level can relate to one or more of these superstars. And I think that's what makes this stuff fun, And even if there's no direct correlation with the superstars, having friends who come in and help you, like a Lita, like a Spike, like a Rhino, everyone can relate to a storyline like that. Your ride or dies. And I think that's what makes this, as a whole, just one of the best matches in the history of WWE, WWF. I mean, hands down.
Yeah, I got to say as well, just on another side note, I heard Bubba Ray Dudley in an or Bully Ray, I guess, saying in a recent interview that he didn't feel, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said like, oh, him and Devon weren't the kind of traditional tag team, and maybe they weren't the workers that, in comparison to like the Road Warriors or Bobby Eaton and is it Stanley? When I go back and watch all of their matches, and I think I tweeted this out when I was watching it, like for the research for this show, I'm just blown away by their kind of work ethic and their work rate in the ring. Like, yeah, they weren't like maybe the most technically sound, but everything was clean, precise, intelligent, good ring awareness, good chemistry, like you name it.
Yep, I agree. And a unique tag team in that, again, it wasn't like a traditional team, right? And for myself, right, it was nice to see someone who had an average body, some meat on their bones, killing it in the wrestling scene, and I think there's something to be said about that, and I think you're absolutely right. I think all three of these teams have certainly etched their names in history, and I think it's tough to have solo careers even beyond that, because there is an element of association that we will always have, as tag teams.
I guess so, but I don't know. If you look at all of those teams, I think they all did it really well.
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, it was just a class act. I mean, I could watch these guys for days. And you know there's going to be a Saudi Arabia show where they do a reunion TLC match in 25 years.
God, no.
They're all going to get $5 million for the act.
After seeing Taker and Kane versus HBK and Triple H, I never want to see another Legends match again. No, thank you.
Well, yeah, we'll leave the reunion tours for New Kids on the Block.
Roman Reigns in like 10 years time or something or whatever. That's fine.
It's so true. It has to be wild, right? As a performer of any sort, knowing how much you love the craft, and knowing, in the recent Taker documentary on the WWE Network where they hit on it a bit, but it's tough to say goodbye to something you love so deeply. I'm blessed in the sense that I'm a comic, right? I hopefully, knock on wood, can do this for the rest of my life. I can get on stage and hold a mic, right? Other people might not have that same privilege or honor, right? Of course, my wit might be going or whatever it may be, but a singer, a superstar, I always feel for people like that because it has to be tough to hang up the boots,
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Taker as well. I find that very interesting because he's been so on and off every year, and it's incredible. I mean, that documentary series is really capturing it well. Like, obviously, if you guys watch WrestleMania 36, I mean, we've got American Badass back, and he looks fantastic. Like,
that's right.
I mean, to me, he looks like exactly how he moved back in 2002, 2003, and it's a solid move. But like, just going over those years, 32 wasn't very good. 33, I thought he was a bit hard on himself, but I can see why he felt like that. 34 was amazing, and then he had like the bad match with Goldberg, that tag match, and do you see what I mean? And then this amazing match just gone. It's so difficult to say like should they, shouldn't they. I think it's like sport. It comes down to match day. Either you're on or you're off, and it doesn't matter like what age you are. I think that like anyone can have a bad match, a bad time of it. I think it comes down to so many factors, and I think like you have to be a wrestler and be in the industry to really get that properly. But
no doubt. I mean, you look at the resurgence. I mean, even like Ric Flair, right? Ric Flair's resurgence later in his career, I mean, was one of his most iconic times in the industry, frankly, as far as memory standpoint. So I think you're right. I think it's tough to call it. But there comes a time that you're like, okay, this you might not want to be in the ring.
Ric Flair is a perfect example because everyone kind of says, well, because if you look at like his final run in WWE, it was perfect. It was brilliant. He was moving just as good as he ever did. We saw some iconic matches in that time, and then he had his final match with HBK, and it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was wrestling. And then he came back in TNA, and it was like, and it wasn't good. And it was like,
oh boy. Yeah, no, I think it's hit or miss definitely with WWE legends and Hall of Famers. And that's what happened in this next match here in the Gimmick Battle Royal. Now, this was a fun little way to spice up the night after an intense TLC match. Of course, this was introduced and commentated by Bobby the Brain Heenan and Mean Gene Okerlund, of course. And I thought this was fascinating. So real quick, we of course had appearances from Bushwhackers, Duke the Dumpster Drozy, the Iron Sheik, Earthquake, the Goon, Doink, One Man Gang, Gobbledygooker, Tugboat, Hillbilly Jim, Brother Love, and Sergeant Slaughter. So I thought this was a fun little thing, but I think it reminded me a lot. Seeing the Iron Sheik was really rough for me. It really like, oh boy, you doing okay?
I say just real quick on a completely different note, like, the placement of this match on the card is so intelligent, coming right off that TLC 2 match, right? So you've got everyone kind of starting, the audience is like, oh my God. Then you go to this kind of comic relief, a bit of fun. Maybe people go out and like grab a soda or whatever, And then immediately after this, you've got Triple H versus The Undertaker.
Oh man,
it's absolutely brilliant. You're right.
Whoever created this card, like, nailed it in terms of like. Yeah. Putting the matches, because I was surprised. I remember this being earlier in the card for some reason, and to find it here was just very, very, very telling. But yeah, a lot of fun this one.
I was just gonna say, from my time working backstage with a company local to me, you always need to have a match that will be able to cool down the crowd, unless you've got another match that's gonna be able to top it in a way. So you can occasionally have these small super cards, such as you have an NXT TakeOver that only has 5 matches. This card here has 12 matches, and it lasts about 3 hours and 45 minutes or so. So, but you know that by that last third hour, that half an hour last stretch for the main event, if they had the TLC match and then gone straight into that, the crowd can be completely blown out. You saw that the next year at WrestleMania 18 when you had the Icon versus Icon match going on just before the main event, which was Triple H versus Chris Jericho. The crowd was spent for that main event and they didn't really care for it, even though it's a great match.
Just on a side note as well, like with that, I think they should have made that the main event. I still can't.
I think everyone does.
Yeah. That will always blow my mind that they did that. I mean, I know they say like, oh, it's the WWE Championship. It has to be the main event. And it's like, no. Hulk Hogan was the main event.
Accurate. Some other honorable mentions, of course, was Kamala, Repo Man, Jim Cornette, Nikolai Volkov, and of course, Freebird Michael Hayes. Ultimately, Methodical, what did you think? Who are you excited to see back in this crazy little gimmick battle royal?
Oh man, Doink the Clown. That dude is always funny to me.
Right? I mean, a little missed opportunity for not having Dink, but yeah, I agree. Doink and Dink, I think. Yeah, there's just something about him. There's something reminiscent.
I gotta say as well, like Doink the Clown moved so well. Like he was still very I guess he was probably still heavily wrestling in the Indies at this point, wasn't he? But...
Yeah, true. And the nice thing with Doink, I mean, the nice thing with that costumer, I mean, I do think it was the Doink the Clown character. However, I mean, it could be anyone, right? I mean, it could have been me wrestling for all you know. I you didn't buy that. Okay, cool. I was not the one wrestling.
I think it was that guy that's most commonly, because I think there's been 2 Doink accounts, isn't there? Or
yep, that's
2
right.
Or 3.
Oh yeah.
But there was one in particular. I think his name was Matt something.
Matt Osborne.
That's it.
That's right. Yeah. I think he's like the kind of most prominent one, isn't he? I think that's who we saw portraying Doink in this one.
And ultimately, Iron Sheik took the win. Iron Sheik was close to taking the win. And of course, Sergeant Slaughter takes out the Iron Sheik like the good old days. So
no. Sheik won. Sheik won.
Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, you're right.
Slaughter comes in and is annoyed at him, and I guess. It's kind of, I found that weird that they made him win and then Slaughter comes back in and gives him a Cobra Clutch and it's like, yeah, no, I got one over on you. It's exactly a bit weird.
Right. You're exactly right. I know my notes here are all discombobulated, but you're exactly right. Yeah, so Sheik wins and then Sergeant Slaughter goes back to win and his music ends up playing, which is really quite funny, but why not just give him the match, right? But
the only reason I thought that was, I mean, I'm not going to strip it apart. It's just a fun battle royal, but if you want to be logical about it and criticize it, I think that you have to always look at matches as okay, what's the payoff, the future payoff? And it's these guys aren't having a feud. There's nothing's happening here. It's WrestleMania. Just do the babyface thing, man. Come on.
Yep, exactly. Now, what was interesting, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this. So during this specific year, obviously we had a grip of Hall of Famers, but this year we actually had no WWE Hall of Fame ceremony. So in case you guys didn't know this, the Hall of Fame actually took a huge hiatus from 1996 to 2004. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I always remembered it as an every year thing. But it did. It took a tremendous hiatus. So this year we did not have any Hall of Famers, and it returned. For those of you who are aware, it returned in 2004, and has continued ever since.
Yeah, and the presentation was a big thing with that, because I remember looking at the old videos of 96, 97, and it was just them meeting up in some horrible lobby. It just looked terrible, some dark lit room, and you got all these legends kind of quietly accepting their awards. And obviously later they make it this big sort of event that I guess someone must have pictured it and been hey, we can sell tickets to this, we can make this an event.
You wonder too, you hit on that kind of being in a dark room doing it. Do you think that has anything to do with kayfabe's rise and shine, during that time, to be able to not have a room full of wrestlers in the room together? It's just a question I'm posing.
No, I mean, it was well out of the bag by that point. I think they probably just didn't see any kind of benefit in making it into something.
You're right, because it's this incestuous ceremony in some respects, right? I mean, and then it becomes, but it's true. Who wants to watch us, stroke each other off? It's well, I would. All of us would, of course. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting take on that too. And of course, speaking of a future Hall of Famer, no doubt. Well, screw it. I think speaking of future both Hall of Famers, of course, this next match was against the Dead Man, aka the American Badass, The Undertaker, versus the Game, Triple H. So I thought this match was wicked cool. And if I'm not mistaken, Triple H's entrance had a live performance by Motorhead.
It did indeed.
So that, of course, was wicked awesome. You know, all of us just really digging it. I love that we were in a time that Motorhead was playing, and then Undertaker's theme song was Kid Rock. So he's rolling down in his Harley, of course. And I just think it's epic. Again, I was watching with someone who's not a wrestling fan, and the individual said, "Is he riding a motorcycle to the wrestling ring?" And I guess with no context, it makes no sense at all.
Trying to explain wrestling to someone who doesn't get it, it's like trying to explain Chinese to someone if they've never read it. You know, it's like where the fuck do you start? Like
the first wrestling match my spouse walked in on and asked, "What is this?" was when Rikishi and Too Cool were doing their dance after a Royal Rumble match. No, it was midway through the Royal Rumble, and they paused the Royal Rumble to do this dance, right? And he's, "What are you? Why is that big man wearing a thong?" I'm like, you know what? I have no words. Like,
it would have been even better if he'd have walked in when like Rikishi's doing like stink face to someone, and your boy he just like turns around and he goes, "What the fuck are you watching?"
Exactly.
What is going on there?
Cool, man. Which is just wild. It cracks me up, some of the shit that we would watch. But like I said, this match of course was no exception. I dug the Harley entrance. I always have. And of course the legendary Mike Chioda was of course refereeing the match. And I love this match. You know, I think it took a hardcore turn again, which I'll be frank with you. There's part of me that thinks it was totally staged and planned up ahead. And then I think they saw the awesomeness that was occurring and they flipped the script and spent a little bit more time in the audience. Couldn't you just feel the hatred for these two men for each other in this match?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like I actually gave all of these matches scores because I wasn't sure like how are we going to do this pod? But I actually gave this the highest one. I gave this one a 10 out of 10. And the reason for that will become apparent when we talk about the next match. But like I looking at everything, like the presentation of how they came out, I didn't, like to address your question, like I didn't really ever buy their hatred because, you know, they were both kind of heels, to be honest. Like, Taker always kind of flip-flopped, and he was kind of always above heel, really. And Triple H, I think his best work has been done as a heel, but again, I think there are certain people, they call them tweeners, don't they? That like, depending on the person that they're facing, that kind of defines, you know, the role they take. And I feel like in this match, there wasn't really a heel or a babyface. I mean, I guess Triple H was the heel, but like, it was just a really good wrestling match. Do you know what I mean?
It really was. It took it on all fronts. It was visually appealing. There's elements of violence that really reverberated throughout the entire arena. And you know, I agree. I think it was a stellar match. And another thing, you know, we talked a little bit about the Taker doc on the WWE Network. You know, I thought it was fascinating to know that Triple H and Taker, despite not, it was interesting because they both had interviews, right, talking about one another, and they both basically said verbatim the same thing, that, hey, listen, we don't talk every day, but I know that if I call him or if he calls me, we'll answer. And I think that's a really cool friendship to have. Now, this match did ultimately mark Undertaker's 9th consecutive WrestleMania win, with, of course, his storied, quote, undefeated WrestleMania streak, end quote.
You know what I always thought was interesting about the whole streak thing was like up until he lost his streak was like, I think like those last few WrestleMania matches before the streak ended, it was almost as if like that's kind of like what his whole thing was. Like, it was just a streak because like he stopped being like full time and started being like more part time. So it was like that's what he was banking on mostly, was like the streak, like for like the last few WrestleMania matches before it ended.
Yeah.
And I think we need to really dedicate an entire episode to Taker, maybe this doc, and the streak, because I think there's so much to be said about that. And, you know, I think a lot of people can say what they will about Taker, but, you know, hands down, legend in the industry, you know, obviously well respected backstage. So this win was nothing short but extraordinary. Really lovely to see. And I do like Triple H's ability, in his younger days to really put people over. I think there's something really cool about that.
Yeah, just on a side note with this, like everyone says like, oh, he buries people, he buries talent, and like, yeah, that's true, but he lost a lot. Like his WrestleMania record
right.
is actually terrible.
Yeah, and I think there's truth to that. And you guys hit on it earlier on William Regal. I think it's similar to being, I always associate everything with improv and comedy, right? And so the first thing I think about with improv and comedy is the most important thing to do is support your fellow mate. I am nothing unless I'm doing good, unless I'm supporting you and making you look like magic. And I think William Regal does an exceptional job at that. I always have thought that he plays an exceptional support player to put people over and make them even more faces. And I think Triple H has an uncanny ability to do the same in a different light. But I do think there's an element of support. The losers are just as important as the winners, when you're talking about driving the greater good or the storyline.
I think you always got to look at like the end goal for everything. Like it's fine if someone is losing, right? But you got to look at what happens afterwards. Like when I think of Triple H and people saying like, oh, that he buries people, I think of things like, the WrestleMania 19 feud that he had with Booker T, where it was built up so well. And it was like, oh, it really made you believe that Booker T was going to become champion. And then when he beat him, it was just like a fart in the wind. It was just like, well, why? And then like, obviously, like I said, like, okay, maybe something is coming afterwards, but literally nothing. Like Booker T didn't get into the main event picture and become champion until 2006, I believe. So it was just, it was just a waste. It was like, okay, well, what was the point of that then? Like, it was just pointless. Was that just to give him a guy to beat at WrestleMania? Like, I know that's sometimes necessary, but like, I don't think that it actually helped Booker T get over at all. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, agreed. Booker T was always going to be a legend. That was inevitable. But like, that specific feud, I don't think it actually served to get him into the main event, because like the insider guys, like people like Bruce Pritchard, will always say like, oh well, we put him in the program to test him out, to see how he handles the main event picture and stuff. And like, I agree, like most of the time that is the kind of case when you look at like what they do with feuds. But I feel like a lot of the feuds that Triple H was in, especially in that Raw era between sort of like 2002 to around 2003, where he was just beating everyone, and even people like Goldberg, like Goldberg had a really good run initially, and then Triple H beat him and like quite badly. And then by the time that Goldberg finally did win the championship, and he beat Triple H for it, it was kind of like it was the wrong time. Like it should have been done like earlier, kind of thing. So I think timing is key in all of this as well.
And timing could not have been any more perfect for the main event of the evening, which was the no disqualification match. A lot of this stuff against Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. So, of course, this one was for the WWF Championship. And, I think this was one of the most, these are probably two of the most iconic wrestlers in our history. And I thought this was a great way to really end or really hype up this feud, for the lack of better words. The build-up promos, the montages, I really just think were the right buzz for that. And of course, before the match, Commissioner William Regal did deem the match no disqualification. The one thing I will say, and I'm very curious, obviously the Texas Rattlesnake was in his hometown, or in his home state, for the lack of better words. What was that reaction like live on the spot, Methodikal?
Man, it was live, man. It was hype and everything. And it's like me being like a Stone Cold and a Rock fan. I didn't really know who to really go for it, because like they were both like Stone Cold and a Rock. They were both like in their prime at this point. And it was like everything leading up to WrestleMania 17 was just epic and everything. And it's like it was one of those matches where it's like you kind of want both of them to win, and that's kind of like how I was. Like, you kind of wanted both of them to win. And then, I don't know if you want to go into it now, but that epic twist just lost the entire, like, pro wrestling, like, everything. Like, man, going into school the next day, you want to, like, fast forward time just so you can watch Raw to see, like, what are you gonna say about this? It's like you're going to bed like, oh my god, what just happened here?
Yep, it's a perfect way to explain, the ending of an episode with, not knowing what's going to occur. And I think this was a perfect example of that. Now, the match itself, I thought was a good time. I think The Rock really played into the heel gimmick really easily. He has this uncanny acting ability that he just was able to kind of tap into that side of things, Of course, this match was reffed by a senior ref, Earl Hebner. And I got to tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed this match. And of course, as you mentioned, in the final moments of the match, Vince McMahon comes in and ultimately teams up with the one and only Stone Cold Steve Austin, resulting in both of them slamming beer cans into each other and, of course, chugging them. So let's talk about it. I know there's a lot going on in this match. We're kind of all over the place in this last one, but I got to tell you, the Stone Cold Steve Austin heel turn at the end of this WrestleMania shook me as a young fan to my core.
I think it would have been fine if they didn't sort of ruin there were some real highlights with Austin's heel turn after that, but mainly just comical. The actual turn wasn't very logical. It would have made sense if Austin had been
the turn wasn't logical. The reason it made so much sense to me, I would have said, is when Austin wins the Rumble and he instantly is going after, we see he's going after The Rock, and we know we're going to get the second Rock Austin match. Mm-hmm. Austin comes into this saying, I need to win. I need this championship more than anything. I need it so much. I will do anything to win. He says that in the sit-down interviews with JR. And the entire
I agree with that part of it, right? But
so making
the issue,
as JR calls it on commentary on the night, making the deal with Satan, siding with Vince to win the belt makes perfect sense as a man who tried to do it his normal way and had failed in the past. He wins the Rumble and thinks, well, I need it back. I'll do anything to get it back. So I think it made sense.
That's not what I mean when I say it didn't make sense. That aspect of it made perfect sense. What didn't make sense was the preceding year afterwards, which made fuck all sense. If Austin had later on turned back on Vince and revealed I obviously did this because, as I said, I'll do anything to win, that would have made sense. But he basically, think about this, the world champion became an afterthought for the next year and started doing comedy skits. And at one point, there was a point where Stone Cold Steve Austin was crying and Kurt Angle had to slap sense into him. Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
The biggest draw in wrestling ever, right? This is what I'm saying. That main event, that twist was brilliant. But it's what happened afterwards that ultimately it kind of defines why everyone says, oh, that was such a bad decision. Because it could have been a good decision if Austin had turned back on Vince at the right time. I mean, eventually he becomes a rattlesnake again and becomes the guy we all know and love and stuff. But it was kind of too little too late by that point. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I just feel that they really messed up something good that they had with this, because this twist was incredible. It was amazing. It was how could he ever side with this guy he'd been feuding with for so long? And it goes against everything we know about him. And to then just ruin it with everything afterwards, I don't know. I'm just kind of gutted. I see it as a missed opportunity.
I agree with that, because I know right at the height of when he joined the Alliance, it was awesome up until that point. Then afterwards, it was it just started to become so comical that it focused less on him and more on Kurt Angle, The Rock coming back, and then that Survivor Series where it was winner takes all and everything, and it was that right there, that match, the winner takes all, they had to end the storyline, because otherwise it was not going to make any more sense. It started to get stale a month before that. They were we need to end this storyline, and then it was basically transitioning from the end of the Attitude Era into the beginning of the Ruthless Aggression Era.
Yeah, but I feel that whole year, I mean, maybe not the whole year, but a good portion of it was largely forgettable. You know what I mean? There was some amazing stuff that did happen, But like 2002 was such an amazing year.
Yeah.
2000 was an amazing year. I feel like 2001 is just a year of missed opportunities. Like, so much could have been done with the alliance angle. Yeah, it's a great point. I think with Austin, it was a kind of a case of, if he'd have been kept away from that, like in terms of the comedy stuff, if it had just been like a tiny bit here and there, that would have been one thing. But like him, like I never forget that image of him sitting there, you know, playing guitar to Vince McMahon, and like, it was all just a bit like too hard to believe. Like, yeah, you could argue like, oh, he's just lost the plot and stuff, but I never bought that he genuinely had like a real alliance. I was always waiting for the turn where he's like, okay, yeah, but this is the moment where he turns on him. Okay, but now, but it didn't happen. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think you're exactly right. I think there's an element of Stone Cold Steve Austin that people are unable to get behind a heel angle. I just think there's truth to that. When you are a badass who's kicking ass and taking names, that already by nature is a heel trait, right?
Yeah.
Heels don't care about the rules. They don't give a shit about the boss, da-da-da-da-da. But Stone Cold made that cool. And I think that's what made this heel turn such a hard piece for the WWE writing team, because I think you're right. I think it was a missed opportunity, especially given, to everyone's point, how brilliant the ending of this WrestleMania was, right?
Yeah.
You could have really driven Stone Cold Steve Austin into the number one heel in the industry, but I really do believe, I don't know that that's possible. There's always this love and affection you have for Stone Cold, even when he's being, you know, a jerk or mean or funny or a dick. You know, it's we have this love for Stone Cold, whereas even The Rock had it, but it was a little bit different in my opinion. Rock has acting chops, right? And I'm not saying Stone Cold doesn't, but it's a different understanding of acting. So he really immerses himself into being this pompous character, right? So I just think that's part of, I think, the heel turn for Austin. I think it's tough for him to turn heel. He's just likable as a badass, which is kind of a really bizarre thing in our industry.
I do agree with that, but I do think that there's a lot of overlooked moments in that 2001 championship run until SummerSlam, where he lost to Triple H, being the two-man power trip. Often overlooked. The next night, the following Warriors War after WrestleMania X-Seven, they did a rematch of the main event and had a steel cage match. But then you had Triple H come down to the ring, who we'd already known had been aligned with Vince McMahon. He looked like he was about to turn his back on Steve Austin and go for the gold himself, before he then attacks The Rock, and then we saw the power trip form, with Triple H then becoming the IC champion, and then eventually a Backlash the following month, they became the tag team champions as well. So all three, between them, they had three championships between the two of them, which was a great time. I think it was a lot of times overlooked because it was such a short reign tag team, and there was only a few major matches between them. But for me, as someone who grew up looking back at this era, it's something that I look back on with with very fond eyes. And I do think that although the heel turn didn't have the perfect ending, which I think is why people look back on it quite sourly, I do think there was quite a lot of highlights that did come from this era.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. I think it is different. I think you hit on an important point too, especially as it comes to wrestling and many other things. Is to look back on it versus being live and in the moment with it. I do agree with that point of, there are a lot of things that when you're not looking at it from the historic eye, that we're missing, right? So I definitely think there was some golden nuggets, no doubt about it. Like I said, the ending of this match was wild. And, the cherry on top of this thing is to drink beer over a limp man's body, I just think is the ultimate. I mean, it's the biggest fuck you can have. So I think to end it like that is probably the most insulting way ever. But that, my friends, rounds out the end of WrestleMania 17. Holy shit, we did it, boys. Now, I want to once again thank my special guests here today, Adam Westwood, Methodikal and Christian Reeve. Thanks, gentlemen, again for joining me for this wicked fun episode.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Gents, let's leave everyone with one word to describe this WrestleMania. And why don't we start with you, Adam?
Groundbreaking.
What about you, Methodikal?
Flabbernocker.
Oh, you're channeling that inner JR. I like it. I agree. What about for you, Christian?
Phenomenal.
And again, if if for those of you who've watched the WrestleMania or not, these are great ways to describe this WrestleMania. And I couldn't agree with any of you guys more. I thought that was the best WrestleMania of my time. I think there's some other ones that rank up there, but my personal favorite. Truly, I want to thank you guys all so much for joining me. Now, let's hear a little bit more of Methodikal's new hit song from his new EP, Phenomenon. Here is Fight. We'll be right back after this.
Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. First round, I'ma get it. I'm strong to the finish. I don't even need no spinach. Stamina never diminish. I'm putting on a clinic. Stepping up to me, oh boy, you gon' get it. Put a boat on your ass like my name was Riddick. BMX style come with bicycle kicks. Man, this dude is sick like a bad mix. Like a white rabbit, come with a bag of tricks. Getting surgical, about to put them hands on you. Mix your ass up like a crip from California. Man, you need to see this, you cannot believe this. Attracting fatal fury in these balled up fists. Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. I'm a knockout king, Muhammad Ali, bitch, you gonna feel the sting. Like a scorpion, but I don't even need a spear. I don't fight fair, I'll put my teeth around your ear. I'll grab an iron mic, knock your ass out like Tyson. The coldest boss to crush your ass since M. Bison. Shuffle so smooth, fighting style so priceless. Floyd Money Mayweather couldn't even buy this. I don't need a tag team partner, man, I got this. Category 5 Hurricane couldn't rock this. Headed to the streets, baby boy, let's dance. You must defeat the Shogun to even stand a chance. Man, turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight. Turn the bass up a bit, about to get rowdy, got my blood boiling. All I wanna do is fight, so keyed up. I'm about to bow and amp, bring the weapons out, man. All I wanna do is fight.
Howdily doodly, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Was that not an absolute blast? Seriously. As I wrap up this wrestling episode, I want to express my gratitude once more for our special guests today. Thank you, Christian, Methodikal, and Adam, for making this dream a reality. I truly love chatting all about the 17th Showcase of the Immortals. Now, Wrestlemania X-Seven was held in the Reliant Astrodome with close to 70,000 fans packing the dome. I personally love when titles are defended and certainly when they change hands. And this WrestleMania had 5 championship changes. These iconic matches made for X7 being one of the best WrestleManias in history. Now, if you'd like more WWE X7 content, feel free to check out my first reaction video on my YouTube channel where I react to the epic TLC 2 match that we talked about earlier in the pod. I'll also post the link to the article all about the legendary WrestleMania in the description of this podcast. So on JonJonandCo.com, I actually wrote a whole article about this WrestleMania. Well, thank you to my guests. Thank you to you all for listening. I am truly, truly blessed to have you all. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, ta-ta.